Happy Friday. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Took the little hiatus yesterday. Big plans. Oh, I see what those big plans had in store all along. Let me tell you, sometimes you really do get chewed up and spit back out, and it's for the best. Usually it's for the best. I'm really blessed to have the people I have in my life who are brave enough to tell me you're being an idiot, quit being an idiot. And I guess luckily enough, I listen to sometimes. And so, hey, it was quite the day. And so I hope you can say the same. For those of you who tapped in on the tarot, well, that was a lot of fun, and I'd probably like to do some more of that in the near future. And today, hoping we don't run into any more of these technical difficulties. I think we'll be fine, but guess you never know, huh? We're gonna get back into Class B, the Bible, that we took the yesterday off for. So this is Jay Baldell, and welcome. If you're new to this channel and you end up enjoying this content, then be sure to hit a like, share, or subscribe. And I'm glad to have you here. I'm glad to have you here. All right, sounds working great. Boy, oh boy, Trav, Russian dolls and Russian dolls and Russian dolls, huh, fam? All right, let's get this music and then we'll go ahead and do our single card pull. And then we'll get into this book. This ought to be a pretty good chapter. Okay, I think we should be ready to rock. All right, so because we're back into the Manly P Hall, we'll do another pull. We'll continue pulling on his book from his tarot deck. We'll see what that energy is. It's Friday. Happy Friday. TGIF. TGIA. Thank God it's any day. Let me tell you, that's the way to move out here, at least in my experience. I guess if you really want to like reject it and say, this sucks, I'm over it, this sucks, I'm over it the whole time, well, that is one way to move. I've moved that way before. I speak from experience. I've moved that way before. I spent some years moving that way, and I just find that it's a lot, at least more to me, more beneficial to move in the way of TGIA. All right, we'll cut the deck and that card there. That's going to be our one. All right. So, what do I see when I touch it? I see black and white. I see it's a trump card. It's justice or it's the high priestess. Well, kind of, sort of, not really. Two of Cups. All right. Two Cups. Well, that's Venus and Cancer. That's a pretty good match. That's usually the card of love. So, I've heard people say it the way of like what people often misinterpret the Lover's card as could be more easily understood here. Because this card is just kind of, it's the Lord of Love, is what a lot of them will refer to it as. These two cups in balance. So both these cups filled up. So how do I want to say? Like an agreement, you could say, an understanding, a mutual love, the love that's met with love. And we see here in the Yoni, These cups have a yoni for the hieroglyph. There's the eye. It looks kind of like the eye of Ra, but I don't think that's actually what it's supposed to be. More like a, yeah, because no, that's like the line of a nose. I'm taking a closer look now. And then this triangle coming down. Huh, that's an interesting one. How am I going to interpret that? Yoni feminine, that's an easy one. Triangle masculine, upright, we could look at it that way. And the eyeball, the observer behind the harmonizing of the masculine and feminine. Yeah, once you goddess, welcome in. Great to see you. Yeah, I agree. That's what I was thinking too. Is that this triangle also does kind of look like a teardrop. So I don't know if if we interpret it like the upright triangle representing consciousness, or even the element of fire, well then there's still would be there kind of the alchemy of the fire water in here, but also because it's not an actual teardrop and it's in the shape of a triangle. So yeah, I think that this is kind of supposed to represent the consciousness. Yeah, I think this is really supposed to be saying right now the observer behind Prakriti, the Yoni, Prakriti, Purusha's back in there, and whatever tears he's shedding are, it's just artificial anyway. It's just a triangle caught up in the Yoni. But hey, you can look at it as it's all artificial. That's fine. That's one way to look at it all. I mean, that is kind of like the highest ultimate truth, but also it's not to say that it's any less true that what we're doing here in the material realm is without significance. And so I think the message, especially on a Friday, so yeah, we're getting hit with that Venus. And also twos, Hawkmon, the tree of life. So that's that masculine aspect, that chaotic aspect. But again, inside of the watery, feminine realm of Bria. So I'm just seeing a lot of that fire water type of mixture of alchemy. And so I think no matter if we don't look at this as a lover's thing, as we look at this as just how do we go about our day, our start to the weekend, balance. It seems to be a little theme of balance in here even, but perhaps more in your watery aspects, in your emotions and your imagination, in the realization that as within, so without. And so if inside you're feeling turbulence, then these cups, they're not going to be having a good time so much. They're going to be cups of nightmares, I guess, cups of stress. You're just drinking on stress. So maybe what you need to drink on is a good cup of balance, and we find that balance through love. And sometimes love can be a hard pill to swallow. Sometimes, like I'm talking about more in this highest sense of love, of what I was saying earlier about you can resist the thing and just decide I'm over it, but I think it's a lot easier to move in a way of just having that compassion. That's kind of what I got hit with heavy yesterday in some deep contemplation, was just this realization of the aeons, right? And where we're kind of still in that overlap, at least according to most people, we're still kind of in that overlap spot of the last aeon switching into the new one. So it's right now there's even emerging, there's these two energies that are trying to merge to get kind of merging together before they're going to split off. And it's the old aeon being represented by the judgment card. So the angel of judgment blowing its trumpet saying, wake up, everybody, wake up. Quit with the nonsense, versus this new aeon being of Horus, of the child, of growth. And we often see Horus with the finger to the lips. And so maybe not getting so stressed out, maybe not getting so worked up about, and finding the balance in what you can and you can't control. Because at the end of the day, there's probably going to be a lot more you can't control, but the more you try to grip on and control it, you're going to end up ultimately again filling these cups with stress. So I think the message is keep these cups filled with love, harmony, balance. All right, that's it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Oh, come on, cards. There we go. Okay, get those cards put back. Quick sip of water, and then let's try to understand this Bible some more. So we had left off on, that's right, chapter 7. That's right, started yesterday, and then see you later stream. That's all right. I was feeling rushed. It just wasn't it was better for it to. Sometimes the universe has bigger plans, and so you got to roll with those punches. And so even if I might have wanted to stick to the schedule, stick to the stream, it just wasn't meant to be. It's meant for us to do it today. So, chapter 7, the New Testament. The 27 books of the New Testament are concerned principally with the life and teachings of Christ and the ministry of his apostles. The exception to this is the book of Revelation, which derives its inspiration from the metaphysics of the Egyptians. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew and belongs particularly to the tradition of the Jewish people. The New Testament was written originally in Greek, although no manuscripts of the 1st or 2nd centuries AD are known to exist. There was a wholesale destruction of these early manuscripts during and after the Council of Nicaea, AD 325. So before like the printing press, that's where we're still trying to put a lot of these pieces to the puzzle together, especially from these like more, well, I mean, a lot of material really of humanity, but for what we're concerned with over here, these more spiritual types of things, these more mystical types of things. And so before the printing press, you might have a couple people who had like a bound up book, but even still where it was going to be handwritten, and so the best like a magus like us could do to hope to have a library was to go to somebody else's library and sit and have a bunch of blank books to basically like a bunch of journals to now hand type, hand write, you know what I'm trying to say, copy into these blank manuscripts. And so that's where you'd have all kinds of magical, biblical, all kinds of different hand copied manuscripts. The gravest doubts exist as to authorship of the Gospels of the New Testament. The Encyclopedia Britannica acknowledges these doubts and also admits that there is no proof of any kind that the Gospels were written by the men whose names were in more recent times affixed to them. The oldest existing codices of the New Testament reveal considerable change and amendment. The King James Version omits a number of passages of a controversial nature, particularly such as would cause doubt to arise concerning the uniqueness or infallibility of the Christian faith. The King James Bible was published first in 1611 under the patronage of James I of England. The actual translations were made by a number of scholars from leading universities. They were elderly men, many of whom died before the book of Psalms was reached. The work was undertaken during the most corrupt period of English education. The principal university records of the time consist of the amount of beer drunk by the student body. All right then. There is a story, possibly apocryphal, but with a ring of truth about it, that King James' final instructions to the translators were in substance as follows. Where the new translations agree with accepted tradition, use them. Where they do not, conform to the popular tradition. When the manuscript was completed, it was given into the hands of Lord Bacon, who is responsible for its present literary excellence. He achieved the impressiveness now evident in the book largely by taking liberties with the text. As a result, the Bible student is not justified in accepting the King James Version as an infallible production, or in believing that the divine dictates were revealed originally in the King's English. In addition to the accepted books of the New Testament, there are a number of apocryphal writings and associated works which have been excluded from the Bible for a number of reasons. In some cases, these books are highly imaginative flights, and in others, they are far too pointed for distribution among the laity. Several important variants of the Gospels and Epistles still exist in European libraries, but there seems to be no great haste to translate or edit these codices for general distribution. The most perplexing and comparatively unsolvable mystery with which the Christian theologian is faced is the almost complete lack of historical evidence concerning the life of Christ. If we accept a few palpable forgeries, our knowledge of the life of Christ is based principally upon the accounts given in the Gospels. It is safe to say that thousands of books dealing with the life of Christ have been published since the invention of printing, but only on rare occasions do the authors attempt a critical scholarship. The Bible itself contains a number of discrepancies on the subject, some of which shall be pointed out as we proceed. It is not the intention to state that Jesus Christ never lived, but in the cause of honesty it must be affirmed that there is no adequate contemporaneous evidence to support the gospel stories. The true significance of the Gospels seems to be not in their historical parts, but in their mystical parts. The Jesus of Galilee may or may not have lived, and it is reasonable to agree entirely with St. Paul that this is not of first importance, but rather it is the Christ in you that is the hope of glory. So there you go, the Christ in you. So yeah, if you believe in Jesus, Jesus was black, Jesus was white, Jesus was whatever, guess what? Then to some degree you're right. Because if it's just a symbol again for this Tiphareth in you that's going to lead you back up together, this HGA, then whatever, you're the one who gets to ultimately kind of decide how that looks. So you want to use Jesus, you want to put a certain skin color and eyes and hair color on him, go right ahead. But you see some of these people get real excited out here talking about, oh, this is the way it was. This is just the, I see people who want to, they want to do the European Jesus way bad, blonde hair, blue eyes. But he was from the Middle East, and I haven't really encountered a whole lot of blonde hair, blue eyed people from that region. So maybe, but it's not, that's kind of beside the point. All right, the birth and childhood of Jesus. The life of Jesus as given in the Gospels is so familiar that it seems unnecessary to summarize this account. In a consideration of problem and interpretation, there is great controversy concerning the actual date of the birth of Jesus. Herod, tetrarch of Galilee, Herod, tetrarch of Galilee, died BC 4. This is embarrassing because it is quite evident that he could not have ordered the slaughter of the innocents. The account of Joseph and Mary going up to Bethlehem to be registered according to the laws of Rome also is unfortunate. Rome exercised the law of registry only on one occasion, and that was during the reign of Quirinius, or Cyrenius in Greek, about 10 years after the death of Herod. Thus, we have an interval of 10 years of uncertainty which every educated theologian knows but seldom discusses. The father of the early church, the fathers of the early church were themselves in considerable discord over the time of the birth of Jesus. Various years were suggested in an attempt to reconcile theology and history. This finally was given up as hopeless, and the debate narrowed itself to the consideration of the winter solstice and the vernal equinox as possible birth dates. The church fought for 500 years to decide which date was right. The decision was handed down in the end by a process of balloting. It is evident that the problem was astronomical. Was the sun born at the winter solstice or the vernal equinox? These were the most sacred dates of the pagan world. Good question. That's the time we're right in that transitory time right now. Winter solstice already a little bit behind us, and the vernal equinox is right around the corner, just a couple weeks. One early Christian system of reckoning was by means of the lunar cycle of 19 years. This is called the epoch. Its calculations are based upon the birth time of Jesus. Tracing back through the epoch, it would appear that Jesus was born at the conjunction of the sun and moon on the 24th of March at 1:30 in the morning at the meridian of Jerusalem. Nice. Aries. Necessity entered into the problem of commemorating the holy days. Meetings of the Christians were forbidden in the city of Rome. One of the principal feasts of the Romans fell near the winter solstice. The Christians met at this time because the vigilance of the Romans was relaxed during the celebration of their feast. This seems to be the origin of the observance of Christmas on the 25th day of December. Such problems would confound any system of theology. In simple fact and substance, no one knows either the day, month, or year of the Nativity. Searching in this maze of theological oratory and historical discrepancies, we arrive at the probable date of the historical Jesus. In the Talmud of the Jews, we learn that Jehoshua ben Panthera was born about the year BC 120 in the reign of the Jewish king Alexander Jannes, probably. This man was a rabbin of considerable influence, a reactionist, and was finally stoned to death for heresy. He was a disciple of the great Jehoshua ben Prachia, a member of the Jewish Sanhedrin, a man who had arisen from the state of a rabbin to a place of high honor among the Orthodox Jews. About the year BC 100, Yehoshua ben Panthera, then about 20 years of age, accompanied his master Ben Prachia to Egypt to escape King Alexander's persecution of the rabbins. The statement that Jesus studied with the Egyptian priests is found not only in the Talmudic writings, but in certain early manuscripts of the Christian Gospels. The Talmud states that this Jesus, or Yahushua, traveled to Egypt with Ben Prachia to study sorcery, so that he became a miracle worker, gained the power of healing the sick, and practiced illusions. Uh-oh. There is an old manuscript which dates from the revision during the Byzantine period, centuries before the King James Version, which was for a time in the possession of the secret order of the Knights Templars of Jerusalem. The 6th chapter, 42nd verse of St. John intimates the journey of Jesus into Egypt. In the King James Version, verse 42 reads, "And they said, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then, he saith, I came down from heaven?" The manuscript reads, "And they said, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he saith, I came down from heaven? Is it because he was dwelt among the Greeks that he comes thus to speak with us? What is there in common between what he has learned from the Egyptians and of what our fathers have taught us?" By leaving out the last part of this verse, the life of Jesus between his 13th and his 30th years have been left empty and mysterious. Also, his connection with the great pagan systems of learning has been withheld from his followers by an unworthy stratagem. Yeah, so people will speculate about that time. Like I see certain people will say how, oh, well, that's because he went all the way as far as India and Tibet and was doing Buddhist things and all of that. But the guy who originally claimed that, I guess, so from what I understand from the actual scholarship that's been done, was this guy went over there. I don't know, was kind of a weird dude, just made up some stuff and came back talking about, oh yeah, this is what happened. But when people actually went to these Tibetan, because he said he read it in like some Tibetan manuscripts or something like that, Indian and Tibetan manuscripts. And then they went over there, and those people were like, yeah, that never happened, and that guy was kind of weird. So, tale as old as time, huh? It's all right. We as humans, we like to embellish, huh? We like to try to fill in the gaps, but that's just not always necessary. In the Talmud, in the Hebrew gloss upon Ecclesiastes, Midrash, Midrash Koheleth, there is another mention of Yehoshua or Jesus as follows. It happened that a serpent bit Eleazar ben Damah, and James, a man of the village Sycania, came to heal him in the name of Yehoshua ben Panthera. The Talmud adds further, Yehoshua was bewitched, raised up, and turned Israel away from her fathers. After their return from Egypt, it appears that Yehoshua and his master Ben Prachia quarreled, parted, and never met again. In the Talmud, Jesus is called also Hamasiah as a prefix or forename. It is derived by combining the Egyptian word Ammon and Messiah. Okay. It also is said that Yehoshua, the son of Penthera and Stada, was stoned to death as a wizard in the city of Lydda. Afterwards his body was hung on a tree. His death occurred about BC 70. The attitudes of the early church fathers may be summarized in the words of two of the proudest pillars of the faith, Tertullian and St. Augustine. Tertullian was one of the three great North African bishops. He is the great authority of the Church, unquestioned upon any ground whatever. He is the very stuff from which orthodoxy is made. To quote him, I maintain that the Son of God died. Well, that is wholly credible, because it is monstrously absurd. I maintain that having been buried, he rose again, and that I take to be absolutely true, because it is manifestly impossible. From this fine example of Tertullian logic, we pass to St. Augustine, who says, I would never have believed the Gospels unless the authority of the Church had induced me to do it. In the presence of such illustrious company, we may feel that our doubts on certain matters are no less reasonable than theirs. From extensive research, I am convinced that regardless of the historical controversy, our true Christian mysticism lies not in the acceptance of historical facts, but in the inward spiritual perception of certain divine truths. There you go. The mystical Christ. In the first chapter of the Gospel according to St. John, it is written, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It is further written, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. It is universally acknowledged that the Gospel attributed to John is the most mystical of the four. It omits the genealogies and the account of the Nativity, and assumes that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, the incarnation of the divine fiat. From the first chapter of John, we gain a profound knowledge of the metaphysical elements in the Christian mysteries. It is almost certain that this work was influenced by the Gnostic tradition which flourished in both Syria and Egypt during the first century AD. Gnosticism derived its authority directly from the Gospels and the Apostles, and maintained that it possessed the secret key of esoteric Christianity. Several mystical groups flourished in Syria at the same time. The Kabbalistic sect was arising among the Jews, the Nazarenes, and the Therapeutae were represented by itinerant teachers who wandered up and down the countryside. The Essenes had monasteries along the shores of the Dead Sea and by the lakes of Upper Egypt. Each of these schools had its prophet, its dogma, and its arcana. The Syrian orders were mostly messianic. They were waiting, one and all, for a king to be born in Israel, according to the prophecies and the scriptures. He should be born to the house of David, and should rescue Israel from bondage to Rome. The Roman governors of Syria considered their appointments to this barren country little better than political exile. There were constant uprisings, rebellions, and intrigues. Rome held on to Syria principally from motives of pride. Rome never relinquished anything. Financially, Roman military occupation was a wasteful expense, bringing no return. The local Jewish princes toadied to both Israel and Rome, attempting to maintain their own positions at all costs. Rome was able to subdue the Jewish colonials and left most of the administration of local affairs in the hands of Jewish tetrarchs. It was in the midst of this general disorder and dissatisfaction that the Christian ministry was announced, or at least such is the modern story. There is much mystery concerning the origin of Christianity. The fathers of the church of the second century seem to be no better informed on the matter than those of the 20th century. The general consensus of opinion being that the King of Kings was born to the Jews, preached along the Sea of Galilee, died on Calvary, and in the person of his apostles and followers, and later overthrew the Roman Empire. It is my belief that the present Christian faith is built upon the teachings of certain Syrian sects, particularly the Essene and the Nazarene. These sects were distinguished for their virtue and propriety, and of all the Jewish communities, they alone made claim to extensive scholarship. Roman governors and officers stationed among the Jews engaged Essenes as tutors for their children. This order claimed descent from the Greek master Pythagoras, who had visited Mount Lebanon and founded a cult there in the 5th century BC. The Nazirs also occupied a prominent position. They were bound together by vows and certain rituals. They had an oath that they would cut neither hair nor beard until the coming of the Messiah. It should be remembered also that the Jewish mysticism of that time had been considerably influenced by the captivities in Egypt and Babylon. Somewhere among these sects appeared the doctrine of the Word made flesh. There can be no question but that the Egyptian god Horus the Younger was the pattern used in creating the messianic character. It is entirely possible that our story of the life of Christ is the account of a neophyte passing through the degrees of a secret order. Such initiation rituals have given us our mythologies of Greece, Rome, Egypt, India, and China. The Grecian gods and Roman heroes were personages of an ancient religious ceremonial. A copy of the Book of the Dead was found recently, in which this presumed account of the soul's wandering in Amenti was marginally decorated with prompter's notes, proving beyond question that it was a drama actually portrayed by living persons. I haven't gotten into that one, but I've been wanting to get into the Egyptian Book of the Dead. If the death and resurrection of Osiris was a play performed on rare occasions with profound solemnity, why may not the Christian drama be of like nature? The medieval church perpetuated the ritualistic aspects of Christian mysticism in their mystery plays. These dramas were presented on certain feast days on the wide porches of the cathedrals. The plays usually depicted incidents in the life of Christ, the life of the Virgin, or the trials of the apostles. Sometimes the plays were interrupted by readers who stood in the high stone pulpits near the church door. Some of the plays took the form of processionals, but usually they were episodical. The explanation now given for these plays is that the illiteracy of the people and the numerous dialectical difficulties in language made preaching and teaching difficult, whereas the visual enactment was understandable to all. Their close similarity to the ancient mystery plays is nevertheless a strong point in favor of their direct descent from the pagan initiation dramas. If this be the case, and certainly such an interpretation is the most meaningful that can be given to the story, we readily understand why historicity is wanting. It would be impossible to give the birth date of Dionysus, Apollo, Odin, Vishnu, or these other divine beings, inasmuch as they were personifications of universal forces contrived as a means of revealing these through legend and fable. It is very possible that the early church fathers, seeking desperately for a concrete human being on which to hang the fabric of their faith, picked Yehoshua ben Pathira as the nearest parallel to be found among the Jewish rabbins. Armed with this small fragment of history, they proceeded to correlate the two, building in a little here and removing some contradictory fragments there, until, lo and behold, the King of Kings is a Nazarene, in spite of the popular opinion that nothing good could come out of Nazareth. This further explains why Helena, the mother of Constantine within 300 years after the death of Jesus was unable to find in all of Jewry any man who had even heard of him. According to the story, she finally came upon one aged man who claimed to have heard that Jesus had lived. He took her to an old Roman execution field where excavations revealed a number of crosses. When the whole matter had been settled to everyone's satisfaction, Constantine, to show his extreme veneration, had one of the Passion nails pounded into a bridle bit for his horse. This, in the presence of the fact that nails had not been invented at that time, shows us just about where we stand. It is to be observed that another one of the nails was melted into the Iron Crown of Hungary, and so to the conclusion that the Christ of the Gospels was a symbolic personage created in the adytum of some ancient temple to personify truth itself and man's whole search for truth. These are the reasons. 1. There is no satisfactory proof of the physical existence of Christ. 2. Christ is associated definitely with the solar myth. 3. The miracles of Jesus could not have taken place without historical recognition. 4. Heretics were not crucified under the Roman law, this penalty being reserved for murderers, robbers, and highwaymen. 5. Herod, tetrarch of Galilee, died 4 BC. 6. The only Roman registration of the Jews was under Quirinius, AD 6. 7. The slaughter of the innocents did not take place. 8. There is no proof that the Gospels were written by the men whose names they bear. 9. The early Roman Church was in no agreement as to the life of Christ, Irenaeus claiming that he lived to old age. 10. It is exceedingly doubtful if St. Peter was ever in Rome. 11. The Golden Legend by Voragine is filled with impossible and absurd legends, most of which have been believed as literal truths for centuries. All of which indicates the quality of criticism with which these religious subjects have been considered. From these and a mass of other material contradictory and controversial, it is reasonable to question the literal Christ as an instrument of spiritual power, to see in the story a mystical exposition of divine spiritual truths. Man, where's that one dude who was talking a bunch of smack about a bunch of ghost stories? Well, I mean, see, yeah, you're kind of right, but you're just not right the way you think you're right. But that's how it goes a lot of the time, huh? I mean, to a certain degree, that's how it goes about the whole dang material existence, just the whole thing of matter, right? Yes and no. Paradox, baby. I've been bumping up against the wall of paradox lately, and let me tell you, it oh, it does not want to budge. All right, interpretation, and I think this is the last section for this chapter. If we consider the gospel account in the light of comparative religion, we shall find that there is very little contained therein not to be found in the great religious systems of the pagan world. It is written in the Bible that Mary, the wife of Joseph, received a vision in which it was foretold that a son would be born to her. She should call him Jesus, and he would deliver Israel from sin. It is most significant that the name of the Virgin should be Mary. There are important phonetic associations. The Latin word mare means the sea. Of course, the word virgin also means pure, and virgin mare means pure sea. In pagan symbolism, the sea is the natural symbol of illusion because of the reflecting quality of water. Mary is Isis, the Egyptian goddess of the mysteries, whose veil no man might lift. She is the Virgin Sophia, the mother of adepts. She is Diana of the Ephesians, the Mater Deorum of the Romans. She is Ishtar, Astarte, Mylitta. Hmm. The Annunciation has its parallel in the legends of the Aztec Indians. Quetzalcoatl, god of the winds and of the sky, whose symbol was the cross and who shed his blood for the sins of his people, was born of Xochiquetzal in the land of the seven colors. An angelic spirit descended from the constellation of Orion and told his mother that she should bear a son who should save his people. Mary, the mother of Jesus, Maya, the mother of Buddha, have an identical significance. They are the womb of the mysteries, from which are born the sons of light, the redeemers, the saviors of men. He who enters the temple and having perfected himself in the sacred wisdom emerges therefrom between the pillars of the porch, is indeed born again out of the great mother, wisdom. Therefore, well, there you go too, right? Because wisdom is what Sephiroth, Hakma, right? And there's our two of cups right there, the great mother. So even though a lot of times where it's seen as Binah, that's why me personally, I have three goddesses I place in that upper triad, symbolic of those three gunas, that trinity of all creation. And so that wisdom over there on that Hakma side, that more chaotic side, before it starts to come into the blueprint, the form of it. Therefore, he is a son of wisdom in Egypt, the son of the hawk, and the son of the widow, Isis mourning for Osiris. In ancient time, the coming of a new adept was announced from the portico of the temple. The god men, the twice born ones, were no longer as ordinary mortals. They were the objects of a universal veneration, the most honored of mortals because they were the closest to truth. These adepts are called sons of the silent mother. In some of the ancient writings, they bore witness before men of the light. They were frequently referred to as the sons of God. Our word college comes from the ancient collegium, which was a society of artisans bound together by vows. Our word gymnasium is derived from one of the names for the temple of wisdom. The institution is the mother of its graduates. The same thought survives to this day in our esoteric system of education. In the term alma mater, the university is acknowledged as the mother of its graduates. The Annunciation, therefore, announces the coming of an initiate. His star has been seen. He has come forth from the portals of the house of wisdom, the virgin mother of the wise. She is the one who, though her sons be many, is still a virgin. Joseph took his wife Mary down to Bethlehem to be registered. There was no room in the inn, and the travelers were lodged in the stable or grotto. It appears from the account that the stable was partly a natural cave. The present grotto of the Nativity shown to visitors at Bethlehem is definitely a cavern in natural rock. The cave is most significant in the symbolism. Right, that yoni. Faber, in his Kabiri, has reproduced a picture of a cave of the mysteries as a frontispiece. Mithras, the Persian Christ, was born in a cavern. Caves are symbols of both the womb and the tomb, or birth and death. Primitive peoples believed that their ancestors lived under the earth in caverns where they celebrated and feasted. Mounds were the domes of the palaces of the dead. A pyramid is a highly perfected mound, containing rooms for either burial or initiation, or both. The southwestern Indians of America still believe that the gods dwell under the earth, that they themselves came out of the earth in the beginning, and also that the souls of the dead return again to the underworld. Among the Indians in the vicinity of the Grand Canyon, there are legends to the effect that this great natural abyss led downward into the world of the spirits. Volcanoes were similarly honored, and for the same reason. In their kivas, or houses of initiation, the Hopis the Hopis dig a small chimney-like hole down into the earth, believing that through this opening the gods can hear their deliberations. The belief that the dead live under the earth, and that an initiation into the mysteries is a symbolic death, caused the rites of the pagan mysteries to be given nocturnally and in weird subterranean places, frequently crypts. Yeah, definitely. This whole thing right there is what I've been saying about this path is just kind of this path of death where you're always experiencing these where that bubble's being popped, but ultimately what's I don't know what the right word is, higher kind of higher, kind of better, kind of more well integrated bubble reform, so that metaphorical death and rebirth cycle that working your way through all this spiritual stuff should be doing. The infant Jesus was born in a manger surrounded by animals. These animals merely represent the animal world, or the material universe, wherein most mortals dwell in the state of dumb, driven cattle. There may be another link in this part of the story. In the Egyptian mysteries, candidates were surrounded by priests who bore over their faces the masks of various animals. One of the most frequently used was that of the bull or ox. These masked priests represented the temptations of the animal world with which the neophyte is repeatedly tested. Jesus was born in a manger. The manger is the feeding trough from which the animal's nature eats of the grain and seed, particularly the seed of wheat, the life bestower, which has long been the symbol of the Savior God. This is a survival of the agricultural cult of a very primitive time. The death and resurrection story belong to the agrarian period of early humanity. After thousands of years, the cult of the wheat seed descended even to St. Paul, who, likening the seed to Christ, says, "That which thou sowest is not quickened except it die." 1 Corinthians verse 15, chapter 15, verse 36. Read the entire chapter for further examples of the seed symbolism. Tithing survives from the same period. Some prophets of ancient days, realizing the wastefulness of man, decreed that 10% of the seed should be dedicated to the God of increase and should be put away for the next sowing. For if 10% of the seed were not returned to the earth, there would be famine and sorrow in the land. The Star of Bethlehem is susceptible of numerous interpretations. Several writers have attempted to prove that a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn heralded the Nativity. The Gnostic interpretation is probably the nearest to the truth. They taught that the star was not seen by ordinary mortals, but only by such as possessed inward vision. The star was the soul of the adept descending from the sphere of light, the higher eons. At initiation, the higher self is united with the mortal nature. This luminous oversoul, the Anthropos, full of light and shining unto the ends of creation, descended through the substances of the invisible planes and came to rest finally in the body of the new adept. This concept is distinctly pagan. After the death of Julius Caesar, a comet was seen. The Romans regarded this comet as the soul of Caesar ascending to the abode of the blessed. This interpretation is more or less inferred by the gospel account. Only 3 wise men came to worship at the manger of the babe, and these came because they had seen his star. The Gnostics taught that the Soter, or Savior, descended through an infinity of eons, lighting each one, falling like a flame from the sky. In modern esoteric systems, the aura, or subtle body, plays the part of the star. From this aura, it is possible to tell the spiritual estate of man. 3 wise men, kings of eastern lands, came to Bethlehem following the star. They brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh as offerings to the newborn babe. Gold is the symbol of mind and of power. Frankincense is the symbol of emotion and beauty, and myrrh is the symbol of the body used in the embalming of the dead. The wise men belonged to the three races to signify that all living things adore the ever living truth. These wise kings are the three lower eons of the Gnostics, the symbols of the inferior parts of man's own nature. Together they make up the personality composed of thought, emotion, and matter. This lower man humbles itself before the incarnate Word and gives allegiance and recognition to the spiritual self. The Immaculate Conception constitutes one of the principal problems of the Church. The acceptance of the virgin birth of Christ is even advanced as an absolute prerequisite to salvation. There are several possible interpretations. Buddha was born through the right side of his mother, which might signify a Caesarean birth, a term based upon the fact that Julius Caesar was so born, or a C section. At the time of Caesar, this was recognized already as a symbol of extraordinary excellence and omen of greatness. Most of the savior gods are born of an immaculate conception, through which circumstance they gain an especial esteem. In the dictionary, the word immaculate means clean or without blemish, and in itself infers no miraculous or metaphysical circumstance. The word assumes a supernatural significance only in the terminology of the Church. Ancient peoples desiring to honor their prophets and teachers frequently ascribed to them some supernatural origin. Muhammad's birth was accompanied by wonders, but such wonders originate entirely in the imagination of the pious. It is intimated that the mother of Jesus had other sons and daughters to whom no supernatural qualities are attributed. There is no factual foundation for a belief that Jesus was conceived in any other than a normal manner. A parallel for this is found in the birth of Pythagoras, 6th century BC. Although his father and mother are clearly mentioned, it is stated by his most enthusiastic admirers that he was conceived by the spectre of the god Apollo, which they themselves called a Holy Ghost. This was not intended literally, but rather astrologically, as he was born under the sign Leo, which is ruled by the sun god Apollo. In the gospel story, Herod is made out as a man of despicable villainy. In truth, he was a mild, kindly person, very solicitous of the welfare of his people, and more or less a nonentity occupying a well-nigh hopeless position. He appears no better and no worse than the average prince of his time. He was beset constantly with uprisings and turmoils, directed not against Rome, but against himself. It is this man who has been immortalized as the personification of all corruption. The Jewish hatred for everything Roman may have inspired a general dislike for Herod, but it is probable that he was simply chosen in the Christian drama to play the part of evil because he fitted approximately into the desired plan. The origin of Herod's massacre of the innocents is twofold. First, in India, where the evil king causes the murder of the firstborn, and second, in the story of Ben Panthera being forced to flee into Egypt to escape the Jewish persecution of the rabbins. The Krishna story in India is centuries older than the Christian account, but it is practically identical with it. The slaughter of the innocents belongs definitely in the class of Apocrypha. See Matthew chapter 2, verse 16 for the account. The Romans were good historians, and so was Flavius Josephus. The slaughter of the firstborn of a whole province never could have escaped the historians. Early Christian theologians have declared that the innocents slaughtered by Herod represented the saints martyred for Christ. But even this fails to satisfy. If we think then in the terms of the mystery ritual, Christ represents truth and wisdom. Herod is cast in the role of ignorance and evil. Ignorance and perversion realize that in the presence of truth they must fail. Therefore, they set about to discover and destroy truth. But what is truth, and where is it to be found? The Institute of Pythagoras and Crotona was burned by a disgruntled and rejected candidate. The master escaped, but died soon after, probably crucified by his enemies. Under the guidance of Rome, the religious and political sects of Syria were as far as possible broken up, their members killed or sent into exile. Take, for example, the case of Simeon ben Yehoah, who was forced to hide in a cave for years. The breaking up and destruction of the old mystery schools and the persecution and martyrdom of their disciples is one of the key interpretations of this fable. In Revelation, the woman, the mysteries, is sent out into the desert, which describes the scattering of the initiates into the Arabian desert. By analogy, this also represents the efforts to destroy truth in society and in man by the cunning contrivances of ignorance and perversion. Oh, dang. All right. Well, that does it for our section 7, chapter 7. Section, we're calling it in this book. Same difference. Wow. All right, then. Very cool. So there you go. That's why I keep saying if you're pursuing the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, Christ can be a great placeholder. And then now there's even more to back it up about because it's just a symbol for truth, right? Easy. And that right there, that boy right there, the devil, symbol for ignorance, symbol for illusion. Which so that doesn't mean that there's not still truth underneath that. But it's all, I guess it's all about how, like I said, there's a right and a wrong way to go about things. But everybody's got to figure it out their own type of way, that's for sure. Well, all right, that was really good, and that was basically exact perfect timing. We're about creeping up to the hour right now. So, I don't think I have too much to add today, other than I appreciate you all very much. I appreciate all the people in my life who are good friends, good teachers. Thank you. And I love you all. And I hope you have a wonderful Friday, a wonderful start to your evening. And I will see you tomorrow. Well, hold on 1 minute. Get motivated. Peace. Welcome. Good to see you. Hope you're having a good day. Yep, so I will see you guys tomorrow. And we'll go ahead and get into that section 8. That ought to be a good one. They've all been pretty dang good so far, so I'm looking forward to it. Until then, this has been Jay Baldo, and thank you again. Bye-bye.